Stop doing stuff.
Sorry, that was my knuckles.
I freaking heard that. So, hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Angry Badger podcast. I'm Richard.
And I'm Brian.
And we have no idea what we're doing. I mean, we are professionals in our own right, in our own fields of expertise, but in terms of podcast and radio production, I think it's fair to say that we're keen amateurs.
Yeah, very keen and probably very amateur, you're right.
Yeah. So we're working hard to try and make sure the sound quality is good. But if we end up giggling and swearing and not making the most sense at times because we're finding it too much fun, then there's a good reason for that. When this is not what we are paid to do day in, day out, we do other stuff, don't we?
We certainly do, mate. We certainly do. And we're probably into sort of similar professions, but probably very different at the same time.
We've known each other for what now? 2 years now?
Yeah, about 2 years, yeah.
Yeah. And we have this weird thing where we know some of the same people, but we have an overlap in our customers and the people who work in our worlds. And we just found another one today. But it's all a bit kind of convoluted. So I'll go from my side and say who I am and what I do, because anybody who's listening to this podcast is now thinking, what the hell have I downloaded here? So my name is Richard Prideaux. I am a man with many jobs, although they're all kind of in the same world. So I left high school and then college and then decided I didn't want to go to university because I thought I'd end up just with an alcohol problem and a massive debt, which, judging by my friends and everyone else I know who went to university at the same time, that would have been true. And I went off to work in Iceland as my first job, which everyone thinks is really exciting.
Not the supermarket.
No, it was a supermarket, okay. Yeah. So my first job was slinging frozen turkeys in a provincial Iceland food store. And then I went on from that to working in a care home and doing all sorts of other things. But alongside that, I was slowly working through my outdoor instructor and guiding qualifications for working in the mountains and mountain bike instructing and rock climbing and other stuff. And I joined the local mountain rescue team and did about 10 years with them. And alongside that, because you don't get paid for mountain rescue in the UK, did things like leading expeditions in other parts of the world for different companies and acting as a remote area medic for other things. And even that weird stuff like when somebody comes around your office asking for donations for their charity event, where actually it's just you're paying for their holiday. I was the person at the other end of that. So when they arrived in Africa or somewhere like that and they were going to climb Kilimanjaro, I'd be the idiot waving at them in the airport wearing the orange logoed polo shirt from whatever company I was actually subbing myself out to at the time. That was about 10 years. And then I started running my own courses, doing my own thing as a company called Original Outdoors. And I do everything now from film and TV safety and location scouting right through to training people who work at the interesting end of military and police in the UK and further afield in everything from how not to die on the side of a mountain or how not to die in a woodland to how to find the bad people when they've gone scarpering away from you and all you're left with a few footprints and a bent twig. I think that kind of covers it. How about you? Who are you?
Well, thank you, Richard. I'm Brian Painter. I run a company called Camouflage, and we are a surveillance and investigations company. My background is I left school at 16 with two GCSEs above C at least, and one was an A-star in drama, which wasn't really going to get me very far long term. So I joined the army, which was my lifelong ambition to do. And I stayed there for about 5 years. I came out and I did very, very many jobs in between, kind of attempting to find something that I actually found interesting. Probably one of the better things that I did, I worked in an outdoor store in Stoke-on-Trent for about 3 or 4 years, which I absolutely loved. And then I ended up moving away from the area, and obviously the job went away with that. And then approximately 9 years ago, it would be over 10 years ago now, I rejoined into the reserves. I spent a couple of years in the reserves in Fort Mercian, and I left that in 2012 to go on to the CP circuit, and spent 3 or 4 years out in Iraq. Came back, and in 2014 I started, which was then Discreet Help Limited, and that's evolved now into camouflage, and we tend to concentrate more on surveillance than we do on security, and that's pretty much it in a very, very short segment.
Well, that's really fascinating, and I want to hone in on one point there. You've got a fucking drama GCSE.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you why and how I got the A star. There was no exam.
This is going to be good.
There was no exam, and it was, I think the lessons were always like on a Monday afternoon. So like after lunch, I think on a Monday was drama until the close of play. So it was just an easy one that I probably spent more time turning up at school around lunchtime, and then spending a couple of hours sat around the drama studio, not doing very much, chatting girls up, and managed to, I think we all got an A star, to be honest. I don't think there was much in it. But as you know me, mate, I'm always one for putting on a show of some sort. I got an A star.
In the 2 years I've known you, there has been the odd moment of drama, I must say. So
well, yeah. I'm not quite in need of a Snickers constantly. Well, I hope I'm not.
Yeah, well, no, you're fairly calm. It's just you do seem to be a shit magnet at times.
Well, this is very true, mate. This is very true, and I'm sure doing this podcast will probably attract a little bit more. And if it doesn't, I'll be very surprised.
Well, as people have probably guessed, there is going to be some swearing in this podcast, and this is not an audio representation of who we are when we are at work and in front of clients, but this is more of if you catch us on a day off down the pub.
Yes.
Kind of persona, I think.
Yeah. Well, talking of pub, what are you drinking today?
I am drinking a Hobgoblin Ruby, the original Hobgoblin, from it was from a can, and now it's in a glass because we have limited supplies, don't we? We do.
We're recording this on a Wednesday evening. It's the 1st of April, so we're well into lockdown now. We're going just as stir crazy as every bugger else is. So so there is limited supplies. I'm on my fair trade Merlot, which I know you're laughing because I got it from Co-op and nobody else knows what the joke is. So it's a Merlot fair trade.
I'm just going to laugh anyway, you know. Yeah. Oh, man. It's, I should also say that we are recording remotely. Synchronizing over.
Just to dispel anything of why I'd be asking him if I was sat next to him. We're not. I'm in Cheshire and Rich is in North Wales, so.
Yep. I am in the wilds of somewhere in a shed, and you're in
I'm in our little back bedroom, which is the only room in the house that hasn't been decorated, and it's horrendous. It's just it's full of Kelly's handbags and shoes.
Well, we did a test recording last night. We discovered that my audio was fantastic and your audio sounded like you were in a really hard echoey room over the dining room table, which was about accurate, wasn't it?
Yeah, so it was over the dining table, and we live in a Victorian terrace, so we've got 2.5 metre high ceilings and what have you. So it's a bit echoey downstairs because we've only recently had the entire house re-plastered and various other bits of work. So,
whereas I am still in a shed. This So this podcast, we have got a format idea for it, and we've got proper show notes, and we've got a schedule for it.
Yeah.
It's just for this first episode, a crucial member of the team hasn't got his arse together yet and sorted out his audio. So we won't be dialing into the United States to speak to Terry on this episode, but we will next week on episode 2, I think.
Yes, well, I hope so. We're trying to include as much or as wider audience as possible, and dialing in with Tactical Tez all the way from Indiana will be an eye opener for most, I'm sure. Yeah,
and it should be. It's this. If you're listening to this episode and thinking this is a rambling pile of, no fear. We will be a bit tighter for the next one. We've got some time codes and things to hit in terms of content. But yeah, I just want to. My understanding of what this podcast is going to be, because I might have got the wrong end of the stick, even though we came up with it together, is that this is something that's going to hopefully hit the people that we both work with and our respective audiences, because this world of social media, you have lots of people who follow the company who you're probably never going to meet and never going to employ your services or do anything with you, but they follow you and they follow along with what you do and your random adventures with work. So this is hopefully an extension of that, both from like my outdoors, wilderness skills, mountaineering, bushcraft, whatever, survival thing side of it, and your weird hiding in a hedge side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think social media is a fantastic thing. And, even going through my own company social media page, it's amazing that some of our most liked and interacted with posts have actually been pictures of me rather than, other things, of all the great stuff that you and I have done together, Rich, going out and seeing snipers and recce platoons and all sorts of stuff. And the content that I think will be really, really great. People actually, they're interested in the people behind the business. And I think that's a great thing. And, this is an opportunity for us both to get ourselves out there a little bit more and, hopefully, build up a little bit more of a following on the back of that.
And we've definitely both got faces for radio, so.
Yes, this actually, when I dialed in tonight, my camera was on, and there was a lot of retching sounds coming from your end, Rich.
Well, at least you were clothed, so it could have been worse. The crotch height webcam from the top of the laptop never does anybody any favours.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, I do have a story about that quickly. It was the Westminster Bridge attack, the first one, and I was in the bath and the BBC rang me and they said, "Can you come on 10 o'clock news and just do a thing?" I was like, "Yeah." They said, "Just give us your Skype, blah blah blah. We're dialing." So I'm on BBC News and I've literally I put a green jumper on that I've been wearing all day. I went upstairs to our office at home and set the laptop up and blah, blah, blah. And all I was wearing was a jumper. So I'm talking about this terror attack that's happened in trying to be as professional as possible. And all I'm wearing is a jumper, and that was it. I've literally just got out of the bath. So, anyway, I digress.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around with the lockdown thing, because a lot of people are working from home and teleconferencing and using Zoom or Skype or whatever.
Yeah.
And you've got to imagine there's a lot of,
well, I'm
office
sure
from
most
the waist
people have
up.
seen the one going round on Zoom where the guy all the companies has dialed in and he didn't realise that his camera was on. I don't know if you've seen this going around on social media. So there's about 20 people dialed in for this works conference on Zoom, and this guy, he's absolutely butt naked, and he's dancing around his kitchen, and obviously the 20 people that he's working with can see that his camera's on and he's definitely not got any clothes on.
Yeah. I saw the one where there was I think it was a Microsoft Team one, but they because there's a setting on there, it's a bit like Snapchat and things where you can put a filter on. This one woman, she accidentally hit the setting that turned her into a potato with eyes, and then she couldn't turn it off, and that was it for the rest of the conference call.
I love it. I've never got those things where you change, but change like into a bunny rabbit or a cat or something.
That's because we're two men in sort of heading towards middle age from the UK. We're not 15-year-old girls.
Well, this is true. Very true.
I mean, I'm not. I don't think I am. Yeah.
Oh, I'm definitely not 15, and I'm definitely not a girl.
Yeah, I've been. Someone's just given me the signal to stop rambling and move on to something. So, we would, on our little show plan, we've got something down here that we said we would talk about a news item. Yeah. So, I mean, let's face it, and pretty much everything for the next week or two at least is going to be around coronavirus.
Yeah.
So we're going to try.
You can't escape it, so we might as well embrace it. And
yeah, but we will move on to other stories as soon as we are able, because I'm already sick of it. So, do you want to go first? What's your story?
Well, what I've done, I mean, when we spoke about this last night, and we kind of gave ourselves a challenge to come up with something. Yeah. I think at the moment, as we said, anything to do with coronavirus, it's force-fed to us every time, from breakfast TV right up until the 10 o'clock news. We're just being force-fed it all the way. So what I wanted to do was try and find something that was a little bit more interesting or a little bit left field, I suppose. And maybe it feeds on a bit on some of the conspiracy theories that are going around. But, this is, I have fact checked this, and, people, please, go ahead and do exactly the same. And you'll be able to find out this thing. Anyway, so the story's from zerohedge.com, a guy called Tyler Durden, and the headline reads, FBI report, border agents stopped a Chinese biologist sneaking viable SARS-MERS viruses into a US airport. It goes on to say, another bombshell conspiracy raising serious questions over the coronavirus pandemic and China's biological weapons research and espionage programs goes mainstream. And now a viral investigative report based on a newly released FBI document authored by no less than the Chemical and Biological Intelligence Unit of the FBI's Weapons of Mass Destruction Directorate, brackets WMDD. Which is far easier to say. It finds that a Chinese scientist was caught under extremely suspicious circumstances transporting vials believed to contain the deadly MERS and SARS viruses into the United States. In late November 2018, just over a year before the first coronavirus case was identified in Wuhan, China, US Customs and Border Protection agents at Detroit Metro Airport stopped a Chinese biologist with 3 vials labelled antibodies in his luggage. And they've lifted this direct from a Yahoo News article. The inspection of the writing on the vials and the stated recipient led inspection personnel to believe the materials contained within the vials may be viable Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, which is MERS, and severe acute respiratory syndrome, which is SARS materials. So it goes on and talks far more about this, and they even have a copy of the FBI report on zerohedge.com. And again, you'll be able to find this on Yahoo News. But it goes to show that all these things talking about, was this a man-made thing from a lab in Wuhan, province of China? Is this a bio attack or something like that? Things like this. I think it does two things. One, it lends credibility to all the people that have said that, but it also fuels a lot of mass panic that these things are happening all the time. I doubt they're happening a great deal, but it does leave a lot of big questions about the biosecurity risk, and that's not just to the United States, but that's to every Western nation.
Yeah, I mean, borders for this kind of thing are completely open. The restriction tends to be the access to the viral agents in the first place and being able to transport it in a viable, safe, as in it's still going to be usable when you get to the other end form, and deploying it at the other end. But in terms of getting it through luggage and getting it ordered in, then it's dead easy. How many things could you smuggle into the UK wrapped in a wish.com box?
Yeah. Yeah.
If it'll survive in a container ship for 3 months, then it's easy enough to get in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this actual story goes on to say, even in September 2019 in Dallas, they caught another Chinese national trying to sneak in vials of H1N1 influenza. This is clearly something that's been well planned, and there must be reasons why they're trying to bring these in. Now, the limited amount that I know, that yes, you can bring in these vials, but you've got to have a way to be able to disperse them. So, aerosolized or gas or whatever it might be, or waterborne. And we know that, the half-life of these kind of samples is very, very short if it's not, done in a controlled manner. However, there must be a reason why they are bringing them in there. So this because of the scale of it, of infrastructure that's required to make and store and then to do something with it when it gets into the target country, it has to be state sponsored as well. You can't. That's not going to be a lone individual or a small group that's coming through. It's not going to be like a sarin gas attack or something like that, which can be done with a small number of people, even though it requires moving liquids and vials of things from one place to another. Something like this does require a fair amount of a reasonable operation behind it, doesn't it, to move it in? Well, absolutely. And even to acquire these kind of things, it's not every lab in the world is actually looking and has samples of these kind of things. It's generally only, it's very strictly state controlled, even in the United Kingdom, and I guess in the US as well through the CDC. So it's I would doubt very much that it's not state sponsored.
You're not going to find these things by rooting in the bins at the back of Porton Down, are you?
I'd like to think not.
I hope not. Yeah, but then as we found out with the last foot and mouth outbreak in the UK, that things labs aren't always as secure as you'd like them to be.
Yes, indeed, and that very nearly decimates. Well, certainly your industry, the farming industry, and many more. That very nearly decimated our entire country. So obviously these things do happen. We're not saying it's happened in this case. However, clearly, there is potential for this to be a weaponized. COVID-19 may be a weaponized bio attack, but we don't know.
No, I hadn't had a look at this website before, but by Tyler Durden, and it's got another quote from Fight Club in the top right hand corner.
Yes.
On a long enough timeline, the survival rate for everyone drops to 0.
Yes.
But
so
time to revisit that book, I think.
Yes. I mean, it's not an alarmist spot. You can. Wherever you want to go, you can always find the stories that you like. But this was it comes from a report from Yahoo News, so
and the FBI and
the FBI and what have you. Yeah, so it was more than verifiable. It wasn't just because I like zerohedge.com, although I'm sure they're great.
Well, although 6 months ago, this story would have just been a blip that would have been on the radar of a few people and then would have disappeared, but now it's very relevant.
Yeah, I mean, September 2019, at Dallas, where they're trying to sneak in H1N1, and I think people are so apathetic to things that happen sometimes, and what real threats may actually be about, and I think that's they are still now. Even though we know that COVID-19 is a killer. Unfortunately, a 13-year-old child was killed of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. So this is a rampant killer, and it has no regard for your age. Although the older you are, the more susceptible you are.
Well, that's it. And to move on to the next story, which is also coronavirus related. From gruff.co.uk, which is an independent outdoor news website in the UK. Welsh groups warn COVID-19 measures risk stigmatising outdoor fans. a group of outdoor organisations has called on the Welsh Government to issue advice on taking outdoor exercise as those making safe use of paths and green spaces risk becoming stigmatised. The 16 groups, including Ramblers Cymru, British Mountaineering Council and the Open Spaces Society, said legislation introduced to deal with the coronavirus crisis should not be used by landowners to completely shut down access. The Cardiff administration passed emergency laws ordering the closure of paths and car parks in areas where the risk of increased transmission was perceived. These regulations went beyond the legislation passed by the UK government. So, yeah, people can read the rest. Part of the background to this is because Wales, although it's part of the United Kingdom, it is devolved in some matters from Westminster and from government in England, so that we have the Welsh Assembly and they pass some different laws. So we had the Health Protection (Coronavirus Restrictions) Regulations 2020 law was passed last week, which is what we're living under now, effectively. There is a Welsh version of that, which is almost identical in the wording, apart from there's one bit which is on Section 6 on the English law and Section 8 on the Welsh law, which is basically says on the English law that you can take exercise either alone or with members of the household, whereas on the Welsh side, it says you can take exercise no more than once a day, either alone or with other members of the household, which is slightly different wording, but it does make a difference in law. Thanks to Ross Worthington, my mate over in Llanberis, for flagging that up. So it's this weird thing we've got going on where there has been quite rightly a restriction on travel and meeting in groups and going out and about the place while we're trying to stop this bulge of infections from the coronavirus becoming too much of a peak and overwhelming the NHS and killing lots of people needlessly. But what this particular story is about is the different actions that are taken in Wales compared to England and Scotland, particularly around access to the outdoors. And it just wants, as far as I can see, these organisations want clarifications from the Welsh government as to what they want people to do or what they allow people to do, because they've closed pretty much most of Snowdonia, or at least the popular mountains in Snowdonia, the ones that people, unless they're real mountain geeks, will have heard of. And also the car parks for lots of places like Bala Lake and lots of popular beaches and other things. It's been closed by law, which isn't the case in England. In most cases, it's closed by recommendation or just by encouraging people to go elsewhere or just not go out. And it's an interesting thing. And as we're looking, nearly halfway through this 3-week lockdown, if it is just 3 weeks, I'd wonder what is going to happen on the other side of it, because there does seem to be a different message put out to the public from Wales as there would be, say, from the Peak District, which you're on the edge of, or the Lake District. Encouraging people not to travel is all very sensible and necessary advice, but it is you wonder whether the Welsh government have actually had a misstep. They have spent millions and millions in the last few years promoting Wales as the adventure tourism destination in the UK, trying to take people away from Scotland and the Lake District and trying to bring them to Snowdonia particularly, but also Wales. I mean, it's been very successful. A couple of years ago, Wales was the Lonely Planet Guide recommended place to visit. And I think possibly that slight change in wording is going to have an effect on tourism in Wales going forward. It's an interesting one.
It is an interesting one, and there's two things really for me that I've taken from this, it's not exclusive to Wales, because I know you and I have spoken about this a couple of times over the last couple of weeks. One is the government or the police overstepping their role. So we need to be very, very careful that the laws and regulations that are brought in for the best possible purposes, and not at the detriment of our own liberty. Because we all know that if a law gets brought in, they will use that law like they did with the Terrorism Act when they changed that again. I think it was in 2017, where people were being stopped under terror laws, and it was nothing to do with terrorism at all. It was just they were using that law, you know, and again, they're overstepping their boundaries, and we need to be very, very careful of that. So I'm very mindful of that. And the second thing that I've picked up, and certainly from reading this and what's happened in the press over the last couple of days, is this thing about we need to be very careful that we're not shaming people. Well, the regulations that were brought in by the Welsh Assembly stated that, or they instructed local authorities, national parks, national resources and national trusts to undertake immediate closures of paths and open spaces where they believed there was a risk of people congregating and spreading COVID-19. Now that's quite implicit. So it says, if you believe that people will come to this place, you must do all that you can to prevent that. So, you know, closing down your site, closing down the car parks, etc., etc. Now, you and I both saw the extent of people flooding North Wales 2 weeks ago.
It was mad, absolute madness. Yeah. It was the busiest day in Snowdonia in living memory.
Yeah,
and that's the official, the official stance.
Yeah. So, you know, these if you cannot follow based on what the Welsh Assembly or the British government have said, if you can't infer from that you do not need to be going to Snowdonia, or you need to be going to, you know, this national park, or be out into the Peak District where I live, or anything else, if you can't infer from that, then I don't want to cast aspersions about people's intellect, but clearly you must be absolutely off your rocker if you have not seen anything on the news that has said specifically, and every other ad break with the chief medical officer saying, do not go out unless it is for X, Y, and Z reason. None of them say, unless you want to go and take a picnic and have a drive out to Buxton, because that's not a legitimate reason.
Yeah, and stupidly, it didn't come from the reaction to this, and the reasoning behind it didn't come necessarily from people heading out for the day. It came from people heading out for treating it like an early Easter holiday and heading out for holiday homes and caravan sites and that kind of thing. I mean, the way the Welsh have dealt with holiday homes and second homeowners has often involved a can of petrol and a box of matches. There used to be the joke. There was a Two Ronnies joke about come home to a real fire, buy a holiday cottage in Wales, and that's, you know, those days are kind of behind us. But I can see that, you know, it wouldn't take long to bring it back, and I think it is we will see an interesting conflict of messages moving forward from this, because presumably Visit Wales and every other tourism body bringing people into Wales is going to be pushing one message, whereas local authorities and the locals themselves are probably going to want to push a different message, which is we like being fairly isolated from the rest of the UK, and we like having a much lower population density than, say, where you live. So bugger off with your giant mirrored sign saying epic on the side of Snowdon or whatever else is the latest tourism thing that they wanted to push. Stunt, that was the word I was looking for. I didn't want to say that out over the microphone because I can get that one wrong easily.
Especially so that was stunt.
Okay, so that's our very sensible and very opinionated news section. This is normally where we would dial into Terry, but I say normally is what we plan to do. But
yeah, well, I mean,
Terry ain't there. Can you do an impression of him?
Hey man, what the fuck's up?
Then there'll be something about a gun. Yeah, and then there'll be something about freedom.
It's lots about guns. Don't tread on me. 1776, etc., etc.
Tea Party, and an eagle.
Yeah, something like that. But what I would, we're talking, Terry, and we do pull his leg about, being a prepper and all that kind of stuff. And I guess Terry is a bit of a prepper, and that's not a bad thing. Very interestingly, we've seen, if anybody that's been on the internet ever has probably seen UK preppers, and I know that they were all over National Geographic and all that kind of stuff, and the survivalist and prepper community is alive and well in the UK. Now, all the people that want to bug out, now, let's say a small percentage of the people that went to North Wales 2 weeks ago, as part of their bug out preparations, what I'm going to do in the event of this happening in my city, I'm going to go to the holiday home in Wales or Cornwall or the peaks or the lakes or wherever it may be. Do they not take into account that when you get to somewhere like North Wales, is it how many ICU beds in North Wales? 50?
Oh God, less than. I think we're down to we're like 10 spread between 3 hospitals.
Well,
that was the pre-corona thing anyway.
Yeah. So you got 10 ICU beds in the whole of North Wales. Now, if half of the southeast decide that they want to go to their holiday cottage and ride out the storm there and start registering with GPs and wanting to use all of those resources, that means there is no resource. In fact, there's infinitely less resource by moving and bugging out, so to speak, than there is if you bugged in. Now, I mean, I'm glad I don't live in London anymore, and I'm really pleased about that, and I'm glad I don't live in the centre of Manchester anymore, and I'm glad about that. But, we can't all run to the hills. 67 million people cannot all run away from the place that we live in the hope that we're going to find somewhere a little bit quieter. Because when you get there, and if you get there, there's not going to be any resources to be shared amongst us.
No, and that's been the thing with this, that we're living in these remote areas that we put up with the limited resources, limited access to various things, virtually no public transport, a 45-minute drive to do anything vaguely interesting involving a town or anything like that. And we put up with all that because it's balanced out by not being crowded in by other people. But as we were talking about last night, a sudden influx of people, even an extra 10,000, 20,000, really is noticeable in terms of the roads or the roads lock up. All the local shops, particularly in places like out on the end of the Llŷn Peninsula or on the other side of Anglesey or somewhere like that, which is at the end of a very long supply chain. They've got a couple of shops there, so it doesn't take long to strip it of milk and bread and all the other stuff. And that the impact is noticed very, very quickly within a day or so. Never mind the fact that you're bringing in stuff, you're touching all the eggs that are at the end, the honesty boxes at the ends of farm drives and things like that, and fondling stuff as you're wandering around from your very expensive Sykes holiday cottage, covering everything in your miasma of coronavirus.
Yeah, and more than likely bringing in disease or illness from another part of the country where it's far more prevalent. Now, I know the cases in North Wales, to a point, have been far, far less than they have in most other places of England. Now, if we'd continued on the trend of people all escaping to their Sykes holiday cottage, although other holiday cottages are available, what state would North Wales be in? You can't build a 4,000 person hospital in North Wales. There's nowhere to put one.
No,
there's not the infrastructure there.
No, it's the thing. It's going to change people's opinions moving forward from this, because they want to decide. They will make an opinion about whether their business is resilient if this all resurges again in autumn, which is quite possible, or we have another one in 2 years' time or whatever. It'll make people look at their businesses. It'll make people look at how resilient their planning for their food and things like that is, but also where they're living and where they'll travel to and where they'll take the holidays. I mean, this is going to have an impact on pretty much every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done a little bit of contingency and continuity planning for businesses previously. And I've spoken with some business leaders in Manchester, and a lot of the things that I ever brought up as a consideration, they would never have thought of. And I dare say anything that I ever told them or advised them, they probably thought, well, it's never going to happen. But now is the time where, for whatever reason it may be, you cannot all come into your work. So how does your business continue to run? And if you have no contingency planning, so we used to base most of it around was an act of terror happening in Manchester city centre. So if they close off the city centre for a week, 2 weeks, or there's public disorder again in Manchester, and people can't come in, or you need to get them all out very quickly. How do you go about doing that? How does your business survive you not being able to get into your offices, get access to your computers or whatever it might be? And now this has happened on a grand scale. And there's so many businesses, even today, I mean, bizarrely, Virgin Atlantic are asking for a bailout or government money, and Tottenham Hotspur Football Club are asking for money from the government because they have no contingency. Yeah.
And it's people are finding that no plan survives first contact, but no business plan survives first contact with this virus. We're finding out that people's cash reserves and everything else aren't as much as they thought they were. Their cash reserves and everything that they were planning for based on a reduced income going forward, not a hard record stop and nothing moving forward for the foreseeable. But yeah, enough on that. It should be at this point in the podcast. I'll do the bit where I don't know, we might have a Patreon thing in the future. We might have sponsors, but we're nowhere near there yet. But if you're listening and you want to help us out and want to do something where we can move forward with things, one thing you can do is go and review this podcast on iTunes or Spotify or wherever else you've heard it. If it's through one of those distribution services, it really makes a difference. Those services recommend podcasts to people within certain sectors, and they're more likely to recommend a podcast that has more reviews. So if you have something to say about the podcast and some reviews to leave there, then please do put them there. We also have our social media. We have on Instagram, we're instagram.com/The Angry Badger or @The Angry Badger. There's the website, theangrybadger.co.uk. If you search on Facebook, we're there as The Angry Badger. We're on Twitter as The Angry Badger. I think we tried to nail pretty much everything we could. We're not on TikTok, I don't think.
And I've got no idea what it is. I keep seeing things of people dancing on it, but I'm not sure I've got the moves for that.
We're both too old.
Yes.
Yep. So next up is the bit with the question and answers section, which is we are going to encourage listeners between now and when this podcast goes out, which will be tomorrow on Thursday on the 2nd of April, between now and when we record the next episode, which will be the Monday.
Yeah.
Monday coming up, whatever that is, 6th of April, to ask us questions about stuff that we do for work and anything on there. So it could be anything from recommendations for a rucksack to
everyday carries,
questions about surveillance, everyday carry, prepping, survival, search and rescue, wilderness skills, all those kind of things.
Yeah. Surveillance, security, anything you want. Challenge us.
Yeah. And if we can't answer it, then we'll bring in somebody who can.
Yes.
But as we haven't got any questions, I've had the idea, which you may think is stupid, of asking, imagining people had asked us how we got into our current roles or how you did one thing. So for you, it could be, what advice would you give to somebody who's going to join the armed forces in the UK, particularly the UK, because that's one you have experience of, but generally. And for me, it would be how to join mountain rescue. So as I've said all this, you get to go first. Haha. What advice would you give to somebody wanting to join the armed forces in the UK?
I think if you are even considering it, make sure that it's something that you really, really want to do. I'm pretty sure it hasn't changed since I first joined the army 26 years ago. But when you encounter people either in training or in your unit, in your battalion, that don't want to be there, there's nothing more of a morale vacuum than that person. And it can absolutely decimate anything, any form of camaraderie and morale and willing to work together as a team, etc., that will be ruined by that person because they don't want to be there. So no matter what it is that you want to join, don't listen to half the people on Instagram telling you, yeah, you only want to join the infantry or the parachute regiment or the REME or whatever. Join what it is that you want to do, something that you're interested in. Don't, if anybody that follows me on Instagram will say, don't settle for second best. And don't. Yeah. If you want to do something, go ahead and do it to the very, very best of your ability. Even if it's rough reg, and I know lots of people are going to hate me because I said that, but even if you wanted to join the RAF regiment, I'm sure they're all lovely guys and girls. If that's what you want to do, go ahead and do it. Just do what it is that you want to do and not what you think other people will want you to be doing. Because I guarantee if you're not doing what you want to be doing, you're going to be really, really unhappy and you will hate it. And that goes for anybody who's in any job whatsoever. And I didn't learn this until I was probably your age, Rich. That's how long I suffered for. Do what you want to do. Do something that you're interested in. Make it a calculated risk that you take to go and do it, but do what you want to do. And, don't think you have to conform to what other people think or say. If it makes you unhappy, don't do it.
It's good advice for life generally, isn't it?
Yeah,
if poking yourself in the eye with a pencil doesn't make you happy, then don't do it.
Well, exactly. I mean, there's going to be times if you join the army that it's hard. It doesn't matter what you join, whether you're joining as a youngster at Harrogate or you're joining as an adult and you're going, straight off to Catterick or wherever it may be that you go and do your training. There's going to be times on there, and usually when you're absolutely piss wet through, it's -3, it's 2:00 in the morning, and you're laying in a shell scrape that's quickly filling up with water, and you probably slept about 30 minutes in the last 3 days. Yeah, that's going to suck, and it does suck. Of course it does. But I tell you what, you will get the opportunity to go to sleep and you will get the opportunity to get warm. It might not be straight away and it might be a couple of days down the line, but you'll look back on that and, look back on it probably fondly because bizarrely you always remember, you never remember the really shit times, you remember all the good times. But yes, sometimes you have to suck it up, but it will get you where you want to be. And if you put 110% into it, you get 110% back.
And there's that thing of if you're seeing, that thing about suffering, when you see the PR stuff, when you see the social media feeds from whatever regiment, whatever unit, you're seeing the stuff that they want you to see for a positive message. But just so imagine that as being maybe, 30% of it, 20% of it, and imagine there's an 80% of the in between there as well that you have to bridge from one amazing memory to the next. So that anything you're doing, it's not all stuff that you can write in your autobiography. I imagine there's a lot of sitting on the side of a training ground waiting for a transport.
Yeah, lots of sitting on your bed playing computer games, listening to music, talking crap, smoking yourself to death, drinking yourself to death, and all the other bits that go along with it. It's not all the excitement of a Royal Marine Commandos advert. I wish it was. But things aren't like that, and life isn't like that. So as you rightly say, Rich, social media gives you a snapshot of what it can be, and you can get so much from it. Probably the only regret I have in life is that I didn't give it longer. But when I was a lot younger, but I was young and impetuous and thought I was in love and all the rest of it, and that's how it is. But
yeah, but now you get to be DS, and now you get to be the civilian contractor standing there as an instructor who can also go home to a proper bed afterwards. not having to go back to Catterick or wherever.
Yeah, well, this is very true. I can get treated like an adult and paid like an adult as well. So yeah.
Although not this week.
No, not for the forthcoming few weeks. Every cloud.
Good answers there. Okay, so for me then, because it's like mountain rescue was my equivalent of joining the infantry. I know it's not the same, but it gave me, as a snotty 21-year-old or whatever the hell I was, it gave me experiences that I couldn't get elsewhere without maybe joining the military. But I had to find my own way doing that because it's not paid. So mountain rescue and search and rescue in the UK, the bit on the land, and for the most part the bit on the sea as well, is completely voluntary, and it's often actually at your own expense. So when I was in a mountain rescue team, all my fuel for driving to call-outs, most of my equipment, lost time at work and things like that all came out of my pocket. I worked out it cost between £2,500 to £7,000 a year to be a member of a mountain rescue team, including fuel and lost time and things like that. By the time I left, I was a deputy team leader, which meant I was doing about 20 to 30 hours a week for the team on top of my running my business and trying to do other things, which is a significant...
That's a huge commitment, Rich.
It's a huge commitment to time and things,
yeah. And, an unpaid commitment at that, it does really show, what it's very laudable, just how much people do give up to do these things for us.
Yeah, and it is, well, so that's the thing. For several years, I was the person sat on the other side of the table during the interviews for people joining that particular team. And we were looking for certain things, but actually, when I had my interview, when I was on the other side and I was joining the team, I'd worked out what they wanted to hear and went along with that. Because as a 21-year-old, what I wanted to do was be a hero and run up and down mountains and abseil out of helicopters, because that sounds like good fun. But when I went for my interview, I said that I wanted to help my wider community and do something with that, which is the answer they were looking for. It's the answer they're still looking for, no doubt. The thing is...
Yeah, that's almost the DS solution, isn't it?
Yeah. So the team I was a member of, you were a trainee for a year or thereabouts before you got to go anywhere near anything interesting on a call out or do any rescues. And the team I was in wasn't that busy. It had about 50 to 60 rescues a year, or searches and incidents. That whole thing about it being something heroic and exciting and fun to do went entirely out of the window on about my third or fourth call out, which was body recovery of a 10-year-old from a river somewhere in Snowdonia. That the lad had been missing for several days and obviously been in the river that whole time. And it was a search and then the body recovery out of a difficult, steep gorge, which, it's not to sugarcoat it. It was a fairly difficult one to do in many ways. So that whole thing of, oh yeah, this is going to be a laugh and I get to do all interesting things and it's better than joining the army and stuff like that, that just completely went out the window after about being in for 18 months. And that thing of joining, or saying I was joining because I wanted to help the community and help other people, suddenly became true. I don't think I'm not unique in that, having that experience, but I do think it's something that anyone looking at joining a mountain rescue team or search and rescue should consider, that you're doing this unpaid. You're going to have to donate a hell of a lot of your time just for training and fundraising events and meetings and all the other bollocks that goes along with it. And sometimes it's going to be an evening's quick rescue of a mountain biker from the side of a sunny mountain in the middle of summer, and you can all go to the pub afterwards. Sometimes it's going to be a fairly traumatic or possibly traumatic body recovery, or somebody's going to die in the middle of you treating them on the side of a mountain somewhere or something like that. You are joining an emergency service, so you have to be emotionally prepared for that. It's exactly like you said with the military. You have to be aware of what you're going into and know that you want to do it. But you have to want to do what it actually is going to be, not what it might appear to be from the other side. And mountain rescue teams now all have social media accounts and PR and trying to give out these positive messages, and the team are doing this and brave volunteers and all these things. And everybody wants to be the brave volunteer that they're talking about in the local paper. But being the brave volunteer isn't really being the brave volunteer. Being the brave volunteer is stumbling around in a forest or on a bog or in neck-deep heather or bracken on the side of a mountain, looking for somebody that you're fairly sure actually has caught a bus to Manchester or wherever. Or you're doing the really difficult stuff at the other end.
But is that commitment, that constant commitment that keeps you going, regardless, of how you feel? And that's, going back to what I was saying about, if you want to, whatever you do in life or in the military or whatever it might be, if you give 110% into that, you'll get 110% out. You can't half-ass doing mountain rescue. You can't half-ass being in the army or in the military.
Yeah, I joined for me. It then, after that 18 months or so, became something I wanted to do for other people. And then I reckon in the last 3 or 4 years in the team, I was staying there because of the other people around me, because I was in a leadership role and I felt an obligation to the people who were there as well, because I had a little bit more time to give. I lived a little bit closer to the base. I could, as a freelancer and self-employed person, I was a bit more flexible for call-outs midweek and things like that. And I was the youngest deputy team leader or team leader in Wales, probably one of the, probably in most of England and Wales. I stayed because of the people around me, and we got to a point in the year that I left where the people around me, it wasn't worth staying for them either. And it sounds very selfish, but that's also the point when it stopped becoming something that I felt like I should be doing, and it felt like it was something that I was giving something to. I then thought, actually, this is the time to leave, and I did leave.
Did you feel that maybe it was taking more from you than you were willing to give? Because obviously, you're not getting paid. It still requires a huge amount of time and dedication and ongoing training that you're paying for. You've got to keep yourself current and all these things. Is that maybe why you felt that this is now's the time to hang up my my jacket?
There was a combination of things over about 6 months, which what you just said there broadly covers it. We went through from a major missing person search in the bottom edge of North Wales, top edge of Mid Wales, near the coast. So you can probably work out roughly which one that was and where. Then that was in the autumn. Then there was a fairly bad winter in terms of snow, and when heavy snow falls in North Wales, and like pretty much everywhere else, the ambulance service kind of keels over, or they can't deal with it. So mountain rescue becomes the de facto ambulance service for everything that's not on a gritted A road. So it was a busy period of a good few nights and 2 weeks total of either coordinating call-outs from a remote farmhouse in the middle of North Wales using airwaves and the digital radio talking to the police, or going out on jobs myself, or coordinating other people so we can maintain cover, all through unpaid volunteers. Meanwhile, you're talking to somebody who in the police, and the police are clients now, and a lot of my friends are in the police, so this is not against them, but you were talking to somebody who was on a significant amount of overtime at that point, and they were happily being paid for the time they were doing it. And then having to do the massive post-incident debrief, which took 3 days, because I was in bronze command doing different things at that point, having to sit there around with a table of people who were all on at least 60 grand a year, all sat around waffling on about something that could have been 3 emails, and thinking, I've given away 3 days of my working life to this.
Yeah.
And it's not something I couldn't give to it anymore. It's like, I feel like I've given enough. I could have dropped down from that position and moved back to being just a team member, just putting my life on the line and that kind of thing. But at that time, I didn't feel that was right. No. And also, I thought the people I was working with as other leaders were complete wankers. But that's by the by. They probably thought I was a wanker as well.
No love lost then.
No, I mean, we've made up since, but it was. It
the
was.
thing is, I totally get it when you're in positions like that. You start resenting other people around you.
Yeah.
That's completely understood, mate. That's it's really, really interesting that even though they're quite different jobs that our first lot of jobs that we did, they were quite different, but the things that we felt and thought and how we attacked these things was very much the same.
Well, I wonder whether that's some common ground, that the interesting thing that you did when you were younger in your 20s shouldn't define you for the rest of your life. It should be something you did that you then built on, rather than this is the interesting thing. And then you're the person in the 50s in the pub saying, I used to do this and I used to. Yeah, but what have you done the 30 years since?
Yeah, he said, yeah. Well, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole veteran community thing. I think we could probably do an entire show on that. We both know people like that. Yes.
Who, it's like, okay, well, this is a really good experience you went through, for better or worse. It was an experience that you should have learned a lot from, but hopefully you've moved on to do other things since then, that you've built on that experience and used that to influence what you did since.
Well, absolutely. The thing is, I've never ever played on for any reason whatsoever that I'm a veteran, because it's of absolutely no consequence to anybody whether I've been in the army or not, or in the military or in law enforcement or whatever it might be. For me, it's entirely irrelevant. I don't expect anybody to speak to me or see me differently than take me for who I am and what I am now. Because what I did, 10 years ago and 25 years ago, it has no bearing on what I'm doing now. It lends some credibility to what I do now, but it doesn't define who I am. And it doesn't de facto make you good at what I'm doing now either. I've worked with plenty of people from special forces backgrounds to, ex-policemen to people with no military or law enforcement experience, and some are good and some are really crap. So it has no bearing whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think it's that, it's the mixture of experiences and mixtures of personalities will define that. So you've got to base everything on that, not on the perception that it necessarily comes in from the outside. Right.
Yeah,
I've been given the signal that I'm rambling too much and we need to move on to the next bit. So what's next? Hold that up.
Yes,
good stuff.
You're good stuff. Yes, I've got a good stuff one.
Right.
Now,
what's this?
When I joined the army, I was in training with a lad called Rich Breakspear, and I think he ended up in the Rifles, but at the time it's the Devon and Dorsets, and then ended up being whatever 2-3 Rifles, whatever it is. Anyway, he put on Facebook the other day that his dad's published a couple of books, and he said, if you want to help out and you want something to read, these are my dad's books, go and get them. So I did. I ordered them off of Amazon, and they arrived this morning. So the first one by Peter Breakspear, and it's a book called Endpoint, and it was the winner of the 2015 Writing Magazine novel competition. So it's set initially in Welsh Valley, so something very close to home for you, mate. I'll read the spiel off the back, and it's a bit of an adventure sci-fi kind of story, I believe. But I'm really looking forward to reading it. I've got a really big thing about supporting people that I know, and if that just means buying a book or buying a sticker or buying them a coffee or half a lamb, whatever, things like that. If I can help somebody out, I always will. So I'm really looking forward to reading these by Peter Breakspear. So thank you, Rich. You probably never listen or even know that I've said it, but thank you very much, mate. I'm looking forward to reading both this one, Endpoint, and another one called Jonathan Brown, which is a bit of a spy novel, I believe, or about an assassin. But yeah, looking forward to reading those. So that's my two good reads?
Well, I've got another good read. It's something along the similar vein, actually. This is something called Only the Dead by a guy called James E. Mack. And this is it's the usual thing that which has come across. A veteran has written a book which is kind of based on something they did, and then takes off seems to go off on a completely different direction. This is a adventure thriller type thing. It's a bit of a Jack Reacher type thing about, ex-services, and then something terrible happens, and now he's found a sanctuary doing something else, and then something comes in to break that sanctuary. So this is a guy who was a Sergeant Finn Douglas of Royal Marine Commando, is haunted by what happened in war, and then what happened to his family afterwards, and then goes off to work in Scotland to be basically an armed wildlife ranger on a private reserve. And then there's something happens with poachers, and then he does something, and then the poachers are after him, and it's a midwinter survival battle thing across the wilderness. It was it's right. So if you're an author and you're looking at stuff, Facebook ads do work, because this came up on a Facebook ad and I saw it and went, okay, that looks interesting.
Yeah, I've done a couple of those, because I mean, in my job where you can't be sat there reading a book, you actually got to be doing stuff. Sometimes it's good to keep your brain active when you might have 11 hours and 59 minutes of complete monotony of just looking at one thing. I listen to Audible books, and there's a couple of times I found stuff off Facebook ads or Instagram, and downloaded those. They've always been good, and I still do that now.
Is there anything particularly that you're listening to at the moment, or you've just listened to, that you can recommend?
Well, there's a couple that I'd love to recommend. Is any of the books by Tom Marcus, who is ex-MI5. He's a friend of a friend. I know a couple of people that used to work with him, and one guy that still works with him. He's done a couple of books, Soldier Spy and I Spy, and I think one other as well. Absolutely fantastic books. The audio books are really, really, really well done. So Tom Marcus, and also another friend of mine, Brian Jones, and his books, and I can't remember what they're all called, but there's a trilogy about Rome, and I've read the first one, and I haven't started the second one, unfortunately, but I really should, because they'd probably tell me off for not remembering. But they are really, really good, and he's a lovely guy as well.
Yeah, I'm going to put pretty much everywhere that you're listening to this podcast, in the notes that I can put there, I am going to put links to all of these books, all of the articles, everything we try and mention. So there's loads of stuff in there that is relevant, and everything you mentioned there. So if we can't remember something, then it'll suddenly look like we did remember it when you get to the show notes. I've got something, because I listen to a lot of Audible stuff as well, but I do listen to quite a few podcasts, because it's great when I'm running, when I'm just wandering around the fields, when I'm going out shooting, driving, all sorts of things. I don't tend to listen to the radio. It's either music or a podcast or an audiobook. And one that I've followed for years, and if you're not aware of it, is a really good listen, is the Cleared Hot podcast, which is Andy Stumpf. Andy Stumpf was a Navy SEAL, but he's not the Navy SEAL that you expect from films and from books and things like that. He's quite modest, but also quite realistic in the way he talks about things, and he has got a very good attitude to lots of different things. And he went from Navy SEALs to wingsuit flying to everything else. Sorry, that's my phone telling me it's sunset. Went from Navy SEALs to wingsuit flying to, I think, CrossFit, and now he's into his bow hunting and all sorts of other things. So if you look through there, I think it's about 120 episodes. There's some really good interviews on there, and also some question and answers with him and some other things. But he talks about which I've spoken to a couple of veterans over here and in the States about that life after the military. He's got some really good takes on that and where you can go with things. And also just sorting out what you want to do in your own life and that thing we were talking about earlier. What do you do with your life? And waiting till you're 35 to work that out. So go and have a listen to that. You'll find it on every podcast platform. He's got quite a good, he's got his own Instagram, but he's got a secondary one, which is Tactical Asshole Actual, which he just takes stuff that people have sent to him and just rips it apart. He did have this, not quite vendetta, but this running battle between one tactical training school in America that were doing some very weird tactics. And he was just breaking it down play by play, saying, why the hell are you doing this? What are you doing that for? Why are you selling this to the public? If you like that kind of humor, it's quite good. But yeah, go and listen to Cleared Hot. And anything else you want to share? Just a couple on podcasts. That's a couple of my favourite ones. One is called Clandestine, and that's CLANDES Time, TIME, by a guy called Tom Secker. He's an investigative journalist, and he is also the most prolific FOIA, which is the Freedom of Information Act requester in the world. He's an English lad. I think he's from Yorkshire originally, so he has looked into a lot of how the military and the state is involved with Hollywood. He's a fantastic researcher, and his podcast is really, really interesting. And he's got a very dry sense of humour, and I find him very, very funny. And he's an awfully nice guy, and he always chats to me on social media. So that's one. And another one that I wanted to mention was Darknet Diaries. Darknet Diaries is hosted by a guy called Jack Rhysider. He is an American young man, and he talks about hackers and things on the darknet, and pretty much every episode he interviews and speaks to these different characters who throughout modern history have hacked big corporations or the government, or been to jail, or done nefarious things and sometimes good things and what have you. And it's just a really, really nice podcast and very interesting subject matter. So that's two, Darknet Diaries with Jack Rhysider and Clandestine with Tom Secker. Excellent. I'll put links to all that below the podcast.
Yeah.
So I think it just leaves us now to say, where can we find you? Where can we find Brian on social media and out there in the world?
Well, if you want to find me on social media, you can find me at camouflage_lumine_tactical. On Facebook as Camouflage Limited, and I think probably the same, but Limited Ltd on Twitter. So you can
that's Camouflage with a K.
Yes, Camouflage with a K. Yes, sorry.
Yeah, Kilo, not Charlie.
Yeah, Camouflage Lumine Tactical. If you put camouflage in, you'll find us. Even if you hashtag camouflage, I'm sure you'll find us. We've got a semi-decent following, which we're really, really grateful for. And we put content out every single day, and we try and keep it a little bit interesting.
And I've got a rather schizophrenic social media presence because I've got different brands that I work with for different clients. So we have originaloutdoors.co.uk, which is where you'll find all the civilian and public training courses and some blog posts. And that's where our YouTube channel is and things like that. And that's at Original Outdoor on pretty much everything. I am at Rich Prideaux, RichPrideaux on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And for the type of people that I think are going to be listening to this podcast, Outdoor Professional is probably where you want to go. That's outdoorprofessional.co.uk and Outdoor Professional UK on Instagram. And we've also got Original Outdoor Media for all the photography and things. But if you go to any one of those platforms, you'll see links back to everything else, but they will all be in the show notes as well. And we've got the Angry Badger for Twitter and Instagram and Facebook.
We have. Please give them a like and a share. Yes. And I will start working on the social media for those accounts as well. Now that Rich has reminded me what the password is, so Yeah, I will start on that. And
Yeah.
And a big shout out also to Sam Smith over in the States. He kindly did our badger pictures for the Angry Badger, a tactical badger, and also an outdoorsman badger as well. You can guess which one of the two is who. But it's absolutely brilliant. I love it. And I know that he's already posted us the artwork over from the States, so hopefully we'll have that in the next week or so. But thank you again to Samuel for doing that. Really appreciate it. You can find him at toucan_art_Sam, I think it is. But yeah, great guy. Thank you very so much.
Yeah, and the sketches are absolutely fantastic. I can't wait to see that. And this is going to be out on T-shirts and things for people to buy as pretty much as soon as we can get it sorted, I think.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're going to. There'll be other stuff around this podcast and other things we have planned. This isn't just something we're randomly stumbling into. We do have a bit of a game plan for this, don't we?
We do. We can't give the game away yet.
No. But no. Secret things that will be announced. But yes, stick with us. It's going to be interesting.
Yes. Well, first of all, Rich, thank you ever so much. Thank you for being able to put all this together. You know, as usual, mate. I just come to it and I just sit there and waffle. But I know you're doing all the hard work. So thank you very much to you, and also to the beautiful Amy for producing all of this for us as well. Yeah,
please don't tell her that, because she'll just want to to be paid or something like that.
She can have yesterday off.
It's a pleasure to do, because this way we get to meet and reach out to more people and hopefully have more conversations with some really interesting and cool people in the future. So this seems like something we should have done a while ago, but it's a good week to launch it.
Absolutely, and I do hope that everybody listening, wherever you are at your makeshift office. I've just had a message from one of my followers on Instagram asking me about the podcast, and he said he's gonna listen to us in his office, aka the kitchen table, tomorrow, which is fantastic. So wherever you're listening to us, if you've managed to last this long, we're really, really grateful. Thank you ever so much.
It is, and it's something we do want to get on with, and we if you listen to us, we will do our part and keep up with the regular uploads and trying to keep the content interesting, and we'll work hard to do our part of it. So you listen to us, we'll make things for you. I think that's a good deal.
Yes. And send us in your questions, suggestions, bits you liked, bits you didn't like, good, bad or indifferent, we don't mind.
Yes. So every week I want to try and find the best badger noises I can find out there on the internet or from anything else. So I've got this. That is the best recording I can find of an angry badger.
And is it actually a badger?
It's a badger, apparently.
Wow. Okay. Well, I do remember that one of the first times that you and I met, and we were up in your woods, and we walked past that set. We didn't realise it was a badger set. We were poking things into the ground, and then we heard, we wonder what the bloody hell it was.
Yeah, if you're listening from Natural Resources Wales or North Wales Police Rural Crime Team, it definitely was not a breach of the Badger Act.
No.
Definitely, no. We didn't intentionally harass a badger.
No.
It was accidental harassment of a badger.
That's true.
And the badger was not harmed in the making of that anecdote.
And the badger did manage to smear its excrement all over my dog's neck last week as well. So the joke's on me.
Yeah, you go home with that. Right, that's it, I think. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with more fun and frivolity. And yeah, I think that's all we can say. So thank you from me, Richard in North Wales.
Me, Brian in Cheshire.
The Angry Badger podcast was produced by Amy Green and is an original outdoor media production. And we're done.
Cool.
Sorry.
That's good.